Hi and welcome to the latest episode of the Leadership Lab. I'm your host, Adam Harris. Today I'm joined by Gillian Campbell, Interim District Director of Te Whatu Ora. Gillian, there's been a lot of change locally and then nationally. I'd love for you to kind of share what's been going on.
Yeah, look, it's massive. It's the biggest change to health and the health structure in New Zealand in 20 years. So district health boards came into being 20 years ago, and 20 years later, the health reforms on the 1st of July came into place, which brought in two organisations to replace the district health boards. So Te Whatu Ora, which I work for, and as you say, as district director, so for Taranaki, and then Te Ora, which is the Māori Health Authority, which works alongside in partnership with Te Whatu Ora. So massive changes for how health services are going to be delivered.
And what does that mean for people locally? Will they notice much change and difference?
Yeah, look, I think to start with, there was a lot of talk pre-1 July about for our staff, of which, you know, we've got a big team, that you would turn up to work on the 1st of July, you'd still have the same email address, you'd still have the same office, and obviously in health, the patients would still be coming in the door and need to be treated. So, yeah, initially the thinking was that you wouldn't see too much of a change, but what we know is we needed to do things differently. So I don't think there's anyone, whether you're in a management position, leadership position, or working on the floor in health in New Zealand, that you won't say that it's tough and has been tough for quite some time. So, you know, we need to see a difference because, you know, patients have told us that we need better outcomes, our community knows we need better outcomes, and actually our staff need things to be slightly different too.
So Gillian, Interim District Director, what does that mean? What do you do?
So that's a very good question. So this role has been put into place from 1 July to the end of December. Each of the districts, the ex-district health boards, had an interim district director put in for 6 months, and really it's part of the transition. So if people ask me what my job is at the moment, interestingly, I believe it's to support Taranaki and to make sure that Taranaki transitions well into Te Whatu Ora as a whole organisation, as well as giving stability and keeping going in terms of, you know, running the business day to day to make sure that we do, as things change, and there is change happening around us now, that we keep going and that Taranaki has a voice both regionally and nationally, but also that locally we make sure we're meeting what our community needs.
So I'll come on to that, but we were talking just before we started. You're the region's largest employer, 2,400 people. I mean, that's A, impressive, but B, a responsibility kind of for you.
Well, that's right. I mean, we're a 7-day-a-week service, health, and we have to cover the whole of Taranaki. So that takes a lot of people to deliver. So yeah, we are the biggest employer. Obviously, getting people to work in Taranaki isn't always the easiest, and we're competing with the rest of New Zealand, and sadly at the moment in health we're competing with the rest of the world in terms of recruitment of staff. It doesn't matter which country you look at, there's a shortage of health professionals out there, so we're having to make sure that we're a good place to work so we can get the staff here and keep our local staff.
What is it that you can do differently to kind of attract people into the region?
Well, I think we've got Taranaki. I mean, I really do believe that's the main thing that we do have here. And what we've found over the years is when people do move to Taranaki and do work within health in Taranaki, actually they often stay, and they often stay for the long term. You know, in previous roles within the District Health Board, we recruited a large number of overseas, and I love using the example of emergency department doctors. We couldn't get New Zealand trained doctors, and we started to get a number of Americans come in, and they would come in for 6 months contracts. Well, this is sort of 8-9 years later, and they're all still here. They're very much, you know, their families, their whānau are all here and love the lifestyle. So I think we can't underestimate what Taranaki has to offer. So it is our big one. The other is that actually we're a good size. So yeah, we're a big organisation, but on the scale of hospitals, we're a medium-sized hospital, and with that people get lots of opportunities. So you often get to do a bit more than you would in a little place, and but you have the support as well that you maybe sometimes don't get in a great big organisation.
Talking of opportunity, COVID. How was that for you leading, or one of the leaders of the organisation, but also what was the impact that it kind of had on the wider team?
Yeah, look, I kind of smile when people bring up COVID because I do call it the once in a lifetime opportunity. And if I think back to the very first phone call that we got with, as things were escalating, and interestingly, WOMAD weekend, and it will always last with me. And look, it was a huge response up front. And to start with in health, I think we were looking overseas and the adrenaline kicked in, and for those first few weeks, months, we were all running on adrenaline. And I think that's fair to say for anyone working in health, wondering what was going to happen. And while everyone else was starting to lock down and look and see, we were in the thick of getting prepared for what might come, and it was adrenaline. I think what we've had is 3 years, and adrenaline doesn't last for 3 years. So the COVID, it's been up and down. There's been peaks and troughs in terms of the response. I say, some amazing things from the team. You can't underestimate how everyone just pulled together with whatever needed to happen. We often had, less than 24 hours notice that things were changing, whether that be a national direction or, we'd suddenly have cases in Taranaki. And the teams, and I'm talking about not just the hospital teams, I'm talking about our iwi providers, iwi, everyone was phenomenal. And what has been done to respond really is impressive when you look back on it. I think what we've got now is everyone's really fatigued. So doing that kind of response where you're continually responding, reacting and managing big demand is what I'm seeing now, particularly within the health sector and the wider health sector, is that everyone is very, very fatigued. And we're not over. So we've got sort of the post-COVID recovery that's happening in health now. So hospitals are busy. We're in October, we're mid-October, and we've got demand like we normally see in the middle of December. So so things are still different following COVID.
So I just want to pick up on that aspect of the fatigue and running off adrenaline. How are you dealing with kind of the physical and the mental health of employees to kind of cope and manage through that?
Yeah, look, we've had a really big wellbeing approach, and I think when I look again, now we're becoming one big organisation. It's amazing how you have visibility of what everyone's done, and our people and capability team led the way for us around a wellbeing response. So we've got a lot of guidance from nationally, but locally the response, and it has been about looking after the well-being of our staff, and a lot of that's just the little things that you can do, and being out and about and trying to support. Now that wasn't quite so easy in COVID because we were all hunkered down, everyone's behind masks, no one was out walking the corridors like we used to. So we tried to do things online like most people to try and put the support, try and get our team leaders really engaged with online forums to be able to find out and hear what was happening and respond. And some of it was little and things, look, in health everyone loves food, so just not extravagance, but just having, so when people are doing long shifts and tired, they weren't having to go and see if they could find somewhere to get something. That we had little kits available with food and things. We tried to look after our staff. We had a large number of staff get COVID, as it went through our communities, and our staff are our community. So we went out and did wellbeing packs, which were well received, and it just sort of, I think it gave the message that while you're working hard for everyone else, actually there is people there that do also care about you. As I said, everyone's fatigued. I'm sure we could look back and say you could do more, but in the busyness. So we tried to really get out there and remember that our staff were dealing not only in the hospitals and, out there in primary care everywhere, really trying to cope with the COVID response, but actually also coping with COVID in their home lives, and sort of had the double whammy.
What was the biggest thing that you learned about yourself, but also your team during that period?
That you can get fatigued. I've always prided myself on resilience, but actually realised that I really had to take the time out for myself, and that was for myself, not even at home. It was actually, I needed time out from family as well. I couldn't sort of go from one to the other. So, really committed to the things that you always say as a manager and a leader. You often talk to your staff and say, make sure you get out and exercise and make sure you have that time. Well, I had to actually live it rather than just say it. So that would be, I think I'm pretty invincible, and maybe not. From a team perspective, from the wider team, look, we always knew we had a good team. I think the team, for the Taranaki community, what our people did and how they responded 7 days a week, beyond incredible, really, and done with humour and done really, really nicely. When the pressure goes on, things tend to go one way or the other, and I think Taranaki needs to know that people working in health in Taranaki are phenomenal people individually with what they did during COVID.
I'm here with Gillian Campbell. Gillian, just last question on COVID. With everything that you kind of went through, what are the changes that are now kind of taken place that from a positive perspective have now meant that you're dealing with things differently than what you were doing before?
So there's probably two bits there. I think there's the way I work and the way we work is, big learnings from there around actually I've always been a team player. Love sport, team player. But the reality is that's a lot easier to say than do. And what we all learned is that just how much a team achieves. Again, we all say it, we all know it, but actually when you go through something huge, you can see it. And I think as a team, we know a team is what delivers. And I've seen not only myself, but my team around me, that a strong team is what's going to get you there. In terms of for the Taranaki community, look, we again learned what we could deliver in different ways, and particularly outside of the hospital setting, what was achieved between all the providers of health, so whether you talk primary care, iwi providers, our NGO sector, actually again, the greater working together. We all say it, but we were all individual businesses. Actually, what you delivered as a whole was so much more. So our challenge is to not let that go and continue that for not just COVID, but actually for all our health response. And sadly, I have a little bit of a saying now that it's, if you've got a COVID diagnosis, you'll almost get a better wraparound service. So we need to make sure that happens for any health need, particularly complex health needs, that actually you get those big wraparound services.
So the wraparound services is the communication and the consistency far greater now than it was previously?
Yeah, I think it's the communication. The teams worked well as what call a multidisciplinary team, and the services all together. We had MSD at the table a lot more. While we've always had communication with other government agencies and government departments, better, and I think we all know that the outcomes for people are better because of it. So it put what we'd all talked about for years into action. Now our thing is not to let it go and not to go back into our own worlds, which should be easy, but actually when you're really, really busy is harder. But I know, Taranaki, when we meet as leaders of various organisations, there's a real commitment to make sure we don't slip back into some of our old ways.
So you mentioned before sports teams. So what sports teams were or are you involved in?
Oh, well, I've ended up, I'll do a plug for the Ravens inline hockey. So a little bit of a minority sport that we fell into from Friday night skating at the skating rink with our son. So not myself playing now, but certainly that's the organisation that we've ended up finding ourselves as a family very, very involved in, by a very obsessed hockey player. In terms of others, my background's as a physiotherapist. And so I got into physiotherapy because I was never going to be a great sports person, wanted to be. So I thought I would look after sports teams. And somehow started off my career in physiotherapy doing that, rugby, basketball, and loved it. And somehow ended up back in the public health system and nowhere near very remote.
So let's pick up on that then. So that was the start of your career and you are where you are now. Just help fill us in between.
You know, people say, what were your goals? Well, you know, I would have loved to have been a physiotherapist for an international sports team. So sadly not doing that. So my career, how did it end up? Look, I say luck, but I guess it's luck that's also through effort on myself, not just pure luck. But actually, I took opportunities as they came, and I believe I've actually had a good career in terms of getting to where I am now, and that if you look over all the roles that I've done, which have been all within Taranaki, I've spent 4 or 5 years in each of those roles, and then another opportunity happens to have come at the right time. So sort of haven't got pushed too quickly. I look around some of our teams at the moment and they've been pushed through very rapidly, you know, in a changing environment that I've actually had 4 or 5 years. So I was just working in the physio department at Taranaki Base Hospital and had a change of managers. There's a vacancy and the team said to me, you need to take one for the team. So I went, oh, okay. And that was really, hadn't really seen myself as a manager up until that point, but actually really enjoyed it and realised in health that you could have more of an influence on health in those roles rather than just the direct contact with patients. So I sort of started to get the opportunity of, I can look at how services are delivered and how we deliver them, and really enjoyed that. And then I got the next opportunity, which was sort of this very blindsided, as could you go down and manage Hawera Hospital for a period of time? And actually that is probably the thing that set me off on my leadership career. Amazing, small rural hospital with incredible people, and I learnt that was where I learnt that the staff are the community, and actually if you listen to your staff you'll find that you also are hearing what your community needs. Obviously a very passionate community down there, and for all the right reasons, and so I got huge opportunities to learn as a leader around, you know, managing very, very passionate staff and a very passionate community, and you know, and I'll hold that as probably the best basis for my career, is what I learnt at Hawera Hospital.
So I'm sensing that whilst the opportunity was there, it almost came as a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I put my hand up for another role, which I wasn't successful in, and got, boy, do we have the deal for you. So, yeah, and as I say, look, it's luck, but also opportunities, and I was like, I wanted to do something different. I'd been in my physio manager role for sort of 4 years and thought, time to do something, was enjoying it. So I took on the opportunity and actually stayed down there for 4 years.
Walking in a hospital on the first day, knowing that you were leading it, what did that feel like?
I was nervous. I might sound like I can talk lots, but actually it's not my natural way to, but I'm a bit of an introvert and I'm quite happy to be in my office in my own space. So actually uncomfortable is what I would say. Plus I learnt very quickly down there that not everyone operates like physiotherapists. So,
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, look, both. But, was pretty quickly challenged and, but actually enjoyed it. I've never been one to shy away from a challenge. So realised that actually I could do things down there, that they were a team that had been through a lot of changes as a community. We're always worried about the health services, and it was like, well, actually this is valued. How do we make people feel valued and get the services running as well as we can? And look, still lots to do in South Taranaki, but particularly the hospital has come a long way.
Just pick up on something you said there. It's important to make people feel valued. How do you do that?
You've got to listen. You can't underestimate the value of really listening to people. And while sometimes you might not agree, you may have different views and opinions, actually listen to people and know that everyone's opinion is a part of what makes the greater organisation, and that it is actually our diversity that we all have that actually is what makes us a good place to work, a good place, and deliver good healthcare. So I think for me it's about listening and responding.
I'm here with Gillian Campbell. Gillian, let's talk about your leadership journey. At what point did you realise and know that you're a leader?
Oh, I don't think there was ever one point. If I go back to working as a physiotherapist and as the manager of the physio department, I still did clinical work as I was managing the team. And there was a point where I started to think I'd rather be in the office, so to speak, than treating patients. Always loved treating patients, and still, that is my background, and it still impacts a lot on what I do. However, I think it morphed. It gradually became where I felt like I could have a different impact on the health services and health system by being in a leadership role. So yeah, it morphed. I wouldn't say there was a point where I went, yeah, now I'm a leader. And then obviously talked about how we're a hospital and what impact that had. Look, sometimes challenges will either make you shrink back and go, actually, don't want to do this, or actually, I quite enjoy these challenges. And that's where that role really set me up for the future, and really had to start to make the decision that, the clinical practice was a thing of the past, and actually I saw myself in leadership roles.
So you've mentioned a couple of times during the interview about this aspect of having an impact on the health sector. Why is that important to you?
Why did I get into a health profession? Well, it was to help sports people and be in sports. But the reality is, as a physiotherapist, you were helping people recover, whether it be sports injuries or not. And actually, I did work privately for a while where we saw a lot of people with sports injuries. Actually, a lot of your work wasn't related to sports, which I learned pretty quickly through my training, as there was more physiotherapy than sports injuries. But it is about people being able to live their lives better, and I don't know, I guess it's something that I do feel strongly about, and I guess if I look at where we're at with the health system now and what's needed to be achieved with health outcomes, I guess as my career's evolved, I think I'm lucky to actually have learned and understand what the health outcomes for New Zealand are, and more importantly aren't, from an equity point of view. So I do truly believe we should do better for people. And look, we all like to live healthy lives, and we all like our whānau to live healthy lives. So yeah, I think it's just something that sits well with me as a person, with my values and what I believe in. And so I feel privileged to be able to work in a role where I can actually have a degree of influence to that.
Talking of degree of influence, if I was to go into the hospital or one of the departments and ask them, what's Gillian like as a leader, what would people say?
There's people who know me really well through, and I think people will say that I'm personable and able to be spoken to, and with that, hopefully they feel like I'm able to reflect what's being felt on the floor. I think there's others who would sadly say what happens in a really big organisation is don't really know what she does, and I think that's probably one of the biggest challenges in a big organisation, is actually for all the staff to understand what you're like. I go by walking down the corridor that people feel very happy to talk to me and tell me what is and isn't going on. So I think I take it from that people feel like that I'm open and approachable as a leader.
As you reflect on your career, is there one or two mentors that you've had along the way? Who were they, and what was the influence that they had on you?
Yeah, look, you can't. Rosemary Clements, who our previous CE, and look, she's been my manager for my last 3 roles that I've had, last 2 roles. Her approach, and probably the bit that I was least comfortable with, which is the out there. I used to always say to her, she's out schmoozing. Hopefully she doesn't see this. I used to say that's all she used to do, but actually her networking ability and her approach with people was something that I learned a lot from. I think from a more technical, I'm physiotherapist, love my sciences, love my numbers, love a scientific approach. She would be the person who has had the most influence for me in terms of the other side that I've had to work on and develop around the people skills. So, I've got a lot to thank her for. Interestingly, I keep going back to my physio starting off as a career, but I was one of these people who always went to different courses, different trainings, and never became oh, I like that, or I like this. I always like to take the odd thing, and fully believe that when I meet someone, you take one or two things out of a person that you like and you try and build that in. So Rosemary, obviously, probably is the biggest influence. But otherwise, I look at, anyone that I work with and take little bits that I do and maybe don't like and try and build that into me as a person.
How do you capture that? Is it in the moment? Are you a reflector? Do you write things down? I'm fascinated.
Yeah, look, I never used to think I was a reflector, and then I've had coaches and mentors more formally through the years, and interestingly realised I was a reflector, but not. No, I don't write down my reflections when it's about me, but what I will do is I'll go out for a walk or a run, and that's where I process things, and I'll process what has happened, what I've seen, what I haven't, and probably to push through the pain, but and distract myself, but also think about what I want to do in the future.
As you reflect or you think back, what's been the biggest challenge that you've had to work through?
Look, I think working and leading in a system where it is really difficult, and you want to go, yeah, we hear you, yeah, it's tough, it's bad, and being able to do that, but being able to remain positive. When I look at this weekend, the hospital's been overflowing. I've had people being pulled in from everywhere to work on their weekends, and you want to go, yep, this is not good. But actually, I believe as a leader, you've got to keep positivity out there and not sort of spiral down, otherwise we won't get ourselves through this. So actually the biggest challenges and the toughest leadership would be what we're going through at the moment.
So those watching or listening to this, what help can they give you and the wider community through that?
I think, we need the right people to access healthcare, and I think there's twofold with that. It's also, I get really scared when you say to people, don't access healthcare if you don't need it, because actually, sadly, often the people that need to access health don't.
Yeah.
So it's also, get your healthcare early, go and see your primary care, your GPs. And look, I know they're really busy as well, and people go, oh, I don't want to go. So really think about where you're going and looking after yourself. The health of our communities and ourselves individually, we've all got a responsibility. And so we need to have people accessing healthcare at the right time. And I have to put a plug for the staff. Sometimes what we hear goes on in the way they're treated by people who are in stressful situations. We understand that is actually they're doing the best they can. So, treat our staff with respect as well when you do have to come in and get healthcare. It's responsibility for all of us to get through this. There's a lot of work happening in the new Te Whatu Ora space around workforce, to get more workforce, to get a bigger and better workforce for New Zealand, and that's going to take time, and we're on the back foot at the moment.
So moving into or transitioning into this new space, what does that mean for you, but from a wider leadership perspective, with all of the people coming together?
Yeah, look, I think there's huge opportunities. You talk about, you asked me who I looked as a role model mentor, and I had one person. Actually, I'm seeing all sorts of leaders, a lot more than I used to see. So I think we're a bigger team. We're, as in the words of Margie Upper, who's the CE, we're a team of teams. And so I think we've got opportunities to have collective wisdom, collective experience and skills to actually do things better at a local level as well as throughout nationally. So what does it mean? We're in a real transition. I think the latest is we're now transition 2.0, so we've moved out of the very first initial stages, and the next couple of years are really going to tell. What I would say to people is, the principles behind and the way that I see both the CEs of Te Whatu Ora and Te Aka Whaiora is it's about getting good healthcare outcomes and being supportive, and a really nice approach. I mean, it's an approach that I look at leaders and go, actually, if these guys can get 82,000 people operating in their positive manner, driven, enthusiastic way is actually will be a great organisation. But, you know, there's a long way to go, and I think they recognise that.
Last couple of questions. Has there been any leadership books or TED Talks or speakers that you've heard that have really struck a chord with you?
Again, I'm not going to say that there's one that stands out. Interestingly, I've just become the podcast person on planes, and I never used to be, and everyone used to send me links to podcasts, and I'd just sort of go, oh yeah, I must get to that. But I've become a podcast on the plane now. You'll see me, I will have downloaded podcasts, and they are general leadership, but I'm not going to sit there and say that there's one thing that has jumped out. I do. I like to listen to everything and take the little bits that resonate with me as an individual.
Last question. If there was a book of your life to this point, what would it be called and why?
I'm going to say Chaos.
Okay.
And the reason for that is in the world of health, and the world I live in, so health fitting within my home life as well, I feel like I'm always juggling multiple balls. Got lots of things going on, and you don't want to drop one.
Thank you, Gillian. I sense the last point though for me is that I sense that through all of that chaos, your style and your personality actually means that there's a level of calmness that you bring to the chaos. And I've really picked up on that through this interview.
Yeah, and I guess that's where the juggling comes from, is actually it's organised, isn't it? There's things going around, but you've got to have them in a controlled manner. Otherwise, you know, you're not doing anyone any favours, including yourself.
Thank you for joining us. This is the Leadership Lab, the latest in this series. Till next time, bye for now.